Hello, and welcome to our webinar on autism tips with Kaelynn Partlow. I'm Amy Cook, BCBA and Community Manager from Rasmus, and I wanted to share a little bit about our story before I hand it over to our fabulous guest speaker. Rasmus is an ABA clinical software company that was inspired by our founder's son, Rasmus, who was diagnosed with autism early on in his life. Our goal is to help deliver the highest quality behavioral therapy services to 1 million children with autism by helping the people who help them: behavior analysts, techs, teachers, parents, and clinical directors. We provide the best clinical platform so you can keep the focus on the child in front of you. Our team wanted to give back to the autism community, and we knew Kaelynn would be the perfect guest speaker for this talk. And I will say that when we first discussed this, we were talking about our audience and whether it was going to be for clinicians or RBTs. And it was our founder, Nikolai, who really felt that he wanted this to be for our parents. So we're so happy to have some parents joining us today. So with that said, I will let Kaelynn introduce herself and get us started.
It's coming. I can feel it. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, it looks great.
Perfect. My mother always knew I was different, starting at a very early age. I've always struggled with keeping friends, tolerating change, and sorting through sensory input. My mom brought up concerns about autism to the pediatricians, but I like to joke that in the 90s, girls couldn't catch autism, which is why I was diagnosed later in childhood. I've also got a relatively impressive list of learning disabilities. This list is so long that I'll summarize it by telling you I didn't read my first book independently until I was 14 years old. Even today, I cannot do math beyond a third grade level. As a direct result of my educational challenges, when I was 10, my uncle paid for extensive academic and psychological testing in Orlando. My expression in this picture is reflective of the fact that prior to exploring Disney with my family, I had to play with the nice ladies for a couple of days. It was at this time that I received my autism diagnosis.
As a little girl, she may know she's different, but not yet have the words to describe how or why. She may only have a few close friends, or she may choose to immerse herself within her interests for hours, collecting endless amounts of information. She might work hard to keep her composure at school and around friends and extended family, but when she finally returns to her sanctuary, she may melt down as a result of bottled up emotions accumulated throughout the day. The world around her can feel too loud, too bright, and too smelly. She often finds herself unable to accurately predict the intentions and actions of the people she's close to. Through careful observation of social interaction, she learns to mimic the mannerisms of others. She quickly connects this mimicry with social acceptance from her peers, despite not always being able to perform it reliably. In fact, her inconsistent brand of social niceties, small talk, and reciprocal conversation might be what you saw first if you knew what to look for. Her renditions of normalcy earn unspoken and mostly unconscious ratings by others, ranging anywhere from deserving of an Emmy Award to stiff and uncanny. Entering adolescence, she continues to perfect her craft and is more or less able to mask her social difficulties. Aside from the people closest to her, no one is fully aware of how she struggles to cope with small changes, keep her body still and quiet, and control her emotions. Moving into adulthood and out of the comfort of living with her mother, she finds that sometimes the demands of adult life exceed her current abilities. Adulthood has unearthed the gaps in her skill sets that weren't as pronounced or prohibitive in childhood. Eventually, she learns the word to describe this wasn't weird. The word for this is autism, and she finds the support she needs to continue to thrive.
My life was forever changed at the age of 13 when I joined Project Hope's small private school for kids on the autism spectrum. I became a peer mentor and discovered that I interact well with children, particularly those on the spectrum. Project Hope is responsive to the individual needs and preferences of the students, and so they developed an internship for me to work toward various goals in helping the teachers. After receiving my diploma, I became certified as an RBT and have been on staff with Project Hope since I was 18. I've worked with clients as young as 3 and as old as 20. My clinical experience is wide, ranging from teaching individuals who use a device to communicate, to providing community, home, and clinical support for clients with extensive histories of dangerous behavior, to working on higher level social and executive functioning skills at an adult level. In 2022, I got the opportunity to participate in the Netflix series Love on the Spectrum. That experience opened several doors for me, but unfortunately, none of those doors had a boyfriend behind them. That said, one of those open doors led to the expansion, really the explosion of my social media. Before Netflix, I had a decently large following on my Facebook page. After Netflix, it was clear that I needed to expand my content beyond relatable autism memes and into content with more substance, delivered in a video format. My entire social media presence is dedicated to dispensing the most authentic autism and behavior analytic information any single individual could hope to portray.
Many language-abled autistic people like myself feel what we call too different to be normal, but too normal to be different. We can feel as though we have one foot in your world as neurotypicals and another foot in the world of having a neurodevelopmental disability. We have too many skills to be true peers alongside those with more profound symptoms, but yet somehow not enough skills to fit in with non-disabled peer groups. And what I didn't realize until recently was that this stuck in the middle feeling was never a life sentence in limbo. In fact, I'm not stuck anywhere. I can move freely between the two worlds, even if I don't have a zip code in either of them. Instead, I reside on the bridge that connects our two worlds and have the unique ability to deliver messages between them. I'm certainly not the first to live on the bridge, but let's just say my unique ability to translate and run messages between the world of autism service provider and the autistic community is worthy of a pay upgrade.
Drawing from both my personal experience as someone on the autism spectrum and as someone who is also a service provider to others on the spectrum, I want to share with you my top autism tips from my place on the bridge. Before we get started, I'll preface this by saying that most of you will already be familiar with these concepts. My hope is to provide you additional perspective on the why behind these strategies we use as providers. I'm going to cover each of the following topics, and I'll move quickly so that they all fit in 50 minutes. If you're a note taker, I suggest adding the topic headings to help you organize. If you're not a note taker, you might consider becoming one today. It may also be helpful to take photos of the slides as we go, so that if you see something you want to remember. Oh man, I forgot one. Along with excesses in restricted or repetitive behavior, an autism diagnosis requires deficits in social communication. It's estimated that 40% of people on the autism spectrum are nonverbal. Language deficits can also be observed to varying degrees in the remaining 60%. Even those of us on the spectrum who have strong language abilities tend to need communication to be direct and concise. I can tell you from personal experience that direct communication builds trust. My most trustworthy relationships do not require me to pick up on implied meanings, indirect requests, or the not so mutual understanding of social customs. Autistic individuals often struggle with answering broad, open-ended questions. After Love on the Spectrum aired on Netflix, I was getting several interview requests every month. Almost every time I got the question, what was it like to be on the show? My mind flooded with the millions of ways to respond to that question. What was it like to deal with the filming equipment, to go on a date, to interact with the public? I was motivated to answer the questions correctly, even if it was just a matter of opinion. I was hypersensitive to any modifiers the interviewers might include. For example, if the interviewer asked, what was your experience like preparing to be filmed? I would say that the preparation was incredibly stressful. We had to clean the house extensively, take measures for COVID, buy new date outfits, and coordinate appointments to suit the schedules of multiple people. But if they had asked, what was your experience with filming like? I would say that the filming was a bit intimidating at first, but that the intimidation quickly faded because of how kind the film crew was. Focusing on those specific modifiers could be paralyzing because I didn't want to answer the wrong question.
Today over ice cream, an acquaintance asked me what my cult experience was like. Turns out he was asking about the church I grew up in. Because of the autism, my brain defaults to thinking in extremes. It takes conscious effort for me to see gray areas. He asked about my cult experience, but I didn't have one of those. So I told him the truth, which was that my church experience was all right, but that didn't feel like the right answer. So my brain decided now would be a great time to share that embarrassing story about my purity ring in youth group. We all had purity rings to signify that we were not going to be intimate with anybody before marriage. My dad came for visitation the weekend after I got my purity ring, and he took us to like some woods vacation for a while. well, I lost my purity ring in the cabin. So when I came back to church the following week, they were like, Kaelynn, why don't you have your purity ring? We just got them 2 weeks ago. And I was like, oh yeah, I lost it in the woods with my father. But I didn't see at the time how that might be taken. And not because it was an overall reflection of my church experience, but because that answer seemed to best fit into his question. For language-abled autistic people like me, our brains can be paralyzed by broad questions because they aren't specific enough, or our brains can fit in extreme components of experiences to better fit those questions.
I'm fortunate to have the language skills to say, can you be more specific? But many others on the spectrum do not have that ability. Language is one area I've always had strength. This was the reason that the pediatricians told my mom in the 90s that the developmental differences she was observing couldn't be attributed to autism. As adults, it's important to recognize that even language-abled kids may not be able to communicate as clearly as we might like them to.
Ironically, despite having autism, the disorder that complicates communication, I spoke early at the age of 8 months. And I haven't shut up since. I've got words for days. Don't like my words, I've got different ones. Other autistic people are not always so lucky. They can't just change their wording if it doesn't come out right the first time. In fact, many can't even word to begin with. Because of this, I'd like to offer you some translation from my own perspective. Some autistic people can't say, I need sensory pressure right now. Instead, they may tense up their muscles, roll around on the floor, or insist on wearing a jacket. Some autistic people can't say, I feel overstimulated. Instead, they might become hyperactive or withdrawn and quieter. Some autistic people can't expand on an explanation when asked for clarification. Instead, they may get defensive, louder, or even combative. Some don't know how to say, I feel distressed when you don't understand what I say because I'm afraid I don't have other words to explain it any better. Consider this to be your reminder that autistic people seeking to get their needs met is not always done in a way that's palatable for other people. Sometimes it's not even understandable by other people. If you're in a position to help autistic people self-advocate, watch for these moments that don't initially feel like self-advocacy because that's where it's needed the most.
Know that many kids who struggle with language can also have difficulty describing a sequence of events. When you ask what happened, you may get parts of the story, but in the wrong order or missing crucial details.
Chances are, if an autistic person struggles with language, they'll also have a really hard time describing a sequence of events. It may leave out important details or give information in an order that doesn't really make sense. Can I tell you something? Today, the teacher said I was going to be in trouble on the bus, and Ben called me annoying. As a language-abled autistic person myself, here's what I do to help my clients who struggle with this. When I hear a story that has a middle but no beginning or end, I usually write out the parts I understand for my clients to see. Can you tell me the story of what happened with Ben on the bus? I've noticed my clients will often describe the actions of other people and how it made them feel, but they usually leave out what led up to those actions, how other people responded, and the effects of it. On the bus with Ben, he calls you annoying, and the teacher said you'd get in trouble. What was happening right before he said that? I was singing because I love to sing, and I'm really good at it. You were singing. Ben called you annoying. And then what happened next? I told him that's really rude and it hurts my feelings. And if he kept saying it, I was going to punch him. When I know how the situation ended, I'll summarize to make sure that my understanding matches their perception. You're on the bus with Ben. You're singing. He says it's annoying. You told him that's really rude to say. And if he says it again, that you're going to punch him. And then the teacher said that you would get in trouble for punching. Is that right? When I get the full picture, I can better understand where specifically they need to be supported.
Notice that my questions were very specific. Your best chance at mutual understanding is to be direct in your communication. Let's look at a basic example of this.
How to communicate with autistic people, a step-by-step guide to being direct. Step 1, think of the message you want to communicate and then verbalize it. Here's an example. Okay, Melissa is exiting the door. She sees that Jay is standing in the way. She thinks of the message she needs to say. She verbalizes it, excuse me, but Jay doesn't move. After I verbalized my message and it didn't work, I go to step 2. Ask yourself, what do I really want to say? So she says, watch out, I'm trying to come through. All right, step 3, after 2 unsuccessful attempts, ask yourself, what does the person need to do with this information? So back to our example, Melissa finally asks herself, what do I want Jay to do with the information that I am giving him right now? So she says, take a few steps back, please. Jay, understanding what she wants him to do, takes a few steps back, allowing her to get through the door. Direct communication tells someone exactly what they should do with the information that you're giving them. This eliminates the guesswork, hidden intentions, and implications.
Basically, use verbs to let the person know what to do. And if you do that, you're already at step 3. Direct communication sounds like, walk with me. First, listen to him talk, then he'll listen to you. Put it down. Tell me about the problem. Look at the menu and then pick one. When aiming to make communication as direct as possible, it's important to get to the heart of what you're attempting to convey. Direct communication eliminates any room for uncertainty or interpretation. Here's an example of what this can sound like.
Okay, today we are going to talk about your personal strengths. What are some things that you're good at? I don't know. I'm good at a lot of things. Are you still thinking about it?
The thing about my answer, you know, Jedi are always focused. They have to stay focused in order to know when the Sith are coming into the Force. That reminds me of my answer. I'm good at staying focused doing my work.
By observing his distractibility, we can see that his assessment of his strengths may not be entirely accurate. While this is someone who doesn't struggle with expressive language, he may still be having a hard time interpreting the broad question, what are you good at? Yeah, staying focused is really important. There's actually 3 ways you can know if you're good at something. I give a more concrete definition of what I'm looking for to help him be more selective with his response. You can do it by yourself, or if you can do it very fast, or if you can do it without any reminders. Yeah. Now that he's got a more complete understanding of the question, I narrow it down further by asking about a specific context. So I would agree with what you said first, that you're good at lots of things. But let's think about being at home first. What things are you good at home?
Technology. Whenever anytime someone needs something to help with a TV, phone, or a laptop, I'm usually good at fixing it by myself.
That's awesome.
Here's another example. When a child looks upset, asking what's wrong seems to be pretty straightforward and to the point. However, some kids on the spectrum might respond better when questions are more specific. Which parts of this problem are making you upset? What needs to change? What can be done to make this easier? Many parents report having difficulty getting their child to tell them about their day at school. Sometimes the barriers to that are complex, like for children who struggle more significantly with language. Other times, kids say, I don't know, because they don't know how to formulate an answer that fits within your question. When this is the case, it can be helpful to make your questions more specific, focusing on a certain topic, activity, action, or person. Tell me about the book you're reading in class. What game did you play at recess? Who did you sit with at lunch? If a child gives an incomplete answer or appears to leave out information, a simple tell me more about that can be effective in instructing them to expand. Conversation is another communication challenge for people on the spectrum. Most adults try to start conversation with children by asking questions they believe the child is likely to want to answer. Who's your favorite character on Mario? What are you building with your Legos? How was your day at school? Unfortunately, there are many autistic kids who are not responsive to this method. Let's talk about why. They say if you're getting to know someone or bond with them, you should ask questions. But if you've seen my videos, you know I'm probably getting ready to tell you that's a problem for many autistic people. Questions intended as taking an interest in another person and their activities can be perceived as a social demand. A social demand requires a response on the part of another person to complete a social transaction. To some autistic people, it can feel like the equivalent of me opening candy, attempting to feed it to you. You're expected to eat it, and if you don't want to, you have to tell me no. In place of questions, many autistic people feel more comfortable responding to declarative statements because these are optional invitations to conversation. Instead of, what's your favorite candy? Or are you excited for Valentine's Day? Try, I'm excited for Valentine's Day because I always get a giant stuffed animal. A declarative statement invites a person to reciprocate if they want to, without an expectation of an answer. This method may take some patience on your part. Remember that declarative statements like this are an optional invitation and do not require a response. They're your bowl of candy available if wanted, meaning that if the child doesn't immediately reciprocate by telling you their favorite character, you should not repeat your statement or follow up with a question. Instead, try putting out a different bowl of candy. You can do this by presenting a statement on a different topic or by making statements while engaged in an activity. This candy presenting strategy also works as a replacement for questions you ask in your daily interactions. You can turn some of those questions into declarative statements. Again, this invites the child to participate in the conversation, but isn't perceived as a demand. This makes it clear that a response is not required, but would be welcomed. Where's your Mario toy becomes, what should we build becomes, and how is art class today becomes. These inviting declarative statements are focused on you, your thoughts, ideas, opinions, or abilities, rather than the child's. Of course, we cannot eternally tiptoe around the need to respond to direct questions or requests. However, too many kids miss out on engagement due to extreme avoidance of perceived social demands. This method allows us to provide valuable interaction until our kids perceive social demands as more social and less demanding. As I try to form connections with the learners I serve, I'm always looking for ways to add value to their experiences.
The secret to connecting with autistic kids is finding ways to add value to their experience. Here's what that doesn't mean. Who's your favorite character? What are you making? Turn that video off. Let's go to the playground instead. Now, here's one of countless examples of what it could mean to add value.
Where does it match? Not there. I found the match.
I found the match.
Next piece.
Next piece.
I'm modeling language that narrates his experience with the extremely important caveat that I'm not demanding or expecting a response. If he uses the language I give, great. If not, that's cool too.
Where is I get next? Do you want to do it?
Yeah, I do. Some bricks.
Bricks. More bricks.
More bricks. I see what we're missing. Looking for it.
Oh no.
No. There's dark bricks.
Let's do dark bricks.
I love dark bricks.
Let's try.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it fits.
I offer solutions when challenges arise rather than demanding that my idea be accepted.
Shifting gears a bit, but still related to communication, you may have noticed that sometimes kids on the spectrum will use scripts to communicate. In the world of autism, scripting is typically defined as the act of memorizing and repeating words or phrases previously heard from TV shows, videos, or said by others.
The taxidermy bird is a taxidermy egg. It's a taxidermy worm. It's a taxidermy snake. And you find it writers on the bark.
In my little corner of the autism world, when a person borrows words they heard from TV shows, videos, or said by others, we call that scripting. Scripting can serve two functions. The first is an attempt to soothe yourself. Repeating familiar scripts can bring feelings of comfort. The second is to compensate for language deficits. If a person has difficulty asking others for help, they might pull from a favorite TV show and recite, "Help, help, we have to help him." When language is borrowed seemingly out of context, many folks find that to be confusing. But what you might not realize is that a certain level of scripting is considered socially appropriate, especially when that specific script is well known or popular.
Or get around town.
It's something a lot of people do, whether they're on the spectrum or not. Depending on who I'm around, my version of scripting doesn't necessarily stand out as unusual.
That time with SpongeBob where he's like, I can see my house from here.
Others on the spectrum may not be able to camouflage it into daily interactions without it being detected as abnormal. When this is the case, it's helpful to remember the two biggest reasons for scripting, which are self-soothing and compensating for communication challenges. Why is it important to know that? Because humans find it a lot easier to approach situations with empathy when they fully understand them. And who couldn't use more of that?
Can you find my favorite on the bark? Taxidermy worm.
We say this a lot, autism is a spectrum, which means that scripting will sound different for different people. The takeaway point is that scripts serve various functions. Some are reflective of needs or desires, others are meant to bring comfort, and some are just meant to be a reference to a context that mirrored one seen in a TV show or video, like my imitation of SpongeBob's dance moves. Since childhood, I've always had a hard time with change, especially as it relates to my schedule. From the time I wake up until I go to bed, my brain likes to run through my scheduled events over and over. I'm picturing myself going through my next activities. I'm picturing in my mind all the roads I'll take on my way to work, the room I'll set my things in when I get there, and all the rooms I'll be in throughout the day, and what other people might be in there with me. I'm picturing myself sitting at a specific place at lunch. I'm picturing the specific sweatpants I'll change into when I go home, and I'll even imagine where I'll lie on the floor as I scroll through social media. Most professionals will tell you the best way to help someone on the spectrum deal with change is by giving them advance notice to allow them to prepare for an upcoming alternative. As someone on the spectrum, I agree with that 100%, but I want to tell you why it helps from my own perspective. As I mentioned, my brain likes to run through all the activities I have coming up. This isn't something I consciously set out to do. My brain just does this in the background all the time. When an abrupt change occurs in my routine without any notice, I find my previously established mental images crashing down. I've constructed such a detailed mental picture of what I was expecting that I find it hard to readjust. It's usually best practice, obviously with some exceptions, to give autistic individuals as much notice about an upcoming change as would be helpful to them. Did you catch that I didn't say give as much notice as possible? When people have co-occurring anxiety disorders, and statistically most of us do to some degree, knowing about minor changes months or weeks in advance may only increase the level of anxiety. Getting to know the sweet spot for advance notice of change will depend on the individual. Being able to reimagine myself going through an alternative plan is a skill I've had to develop over time. Many people on the spectrum will need assistance talking through the change. People often ask me, but what do we do when we can't give notice? When an unexpected change occurs, presenting the information in a concise and direct way, along with an explanation of why, is most helpful. Scary situations become less scary when we fully understand what's happening and why. Many of us experience the feeling of loss of control in response to a change. That can set the stage for disruptive or even dangerous behaviors in an attempt to regain this control. This is where the power of choice comes in. Giving people choices, even if they seem small, can return the feeling of control and help them navigate their responses.
Ian has been working on making coffee as a part of his vocational training. This is his favorite task because he always makes some for himself at the end of the work period.
Hey, Ian, I just want to give you a heads up that we're out of coffee today, so you'll need to pick something different. I can see that's frustrating for you. I know how much you like coffee. Running out of coffee was unexpected, right? So today our options are going to be to restock our snacks or take inventory. We can make sure coffee's on our list for the next time we go to the store, okay? All right, take some time, think about your options, and let me know when you're ready to make a choice. All right, I'm here if you need any help. What did you pick? Do you want to do inventory or restock the snacks?
Restock the snacks.
Okay.
Ian may need some time to make an alternative choice. After he clearly understands the options, it's best to give him some space to process them. Restating the options or negotiating the coffee issue may increase his frustration. Validate the frustration, offer choices, and wait.
You might be surprised that many autistic people perceive an unexpected change as being told no to something they want. Many of us have specific expectations of how a situation or event will take place. Sometimes those expectations in our heads can be unreasonable, impossible, and uncommunicated. Personally, I run into this reoccurring problem surrounding weekend plans. I've got a plan in my head of where I want to go, who will come with me, and what we'll do. I often forget to loop those other people into the plan, so when they're unavailable or circumstances change, I tend to get upset. Hearing no can result in a shattered mental image. When I work with clients, I follow this format. If they show signs of being upset as the result of a request that cannot be granted, I'll give an empathy statement to show that I understand what they want and how they feel. This can sound like, I know you really wanted the thing, and I'm really sorry. Next, I'll tell them when or how their request could be granted. If you think about it, when we're told no, it doesn't mean never. Most no's just mean not right now. Saying something like, that would be a great idea for when the sun is out, tells the person under which conditions the request could be granted. I'll often provide a visual to confirm that I understand the request and I plan to help them follow up on it at another time. This could be as simple as writing down the request for them to see or taking a picture of the activity they wanted. I might say, let's write this idea on a sticky note so we don't forget about it. Last, I'll remind them of what the current available options are to support them in making an alternative choice. This could sound like, right now we can read a book or play in the backyard. Again, this is another strategy that may require patience on your part. I always recommend giving kids time to process their disappointment, knowing it might be packaged in the form of anger. Part of the diagnostic criteria for autism includes restricted and repetitive behavior. This category encompasses the need for sameness and insistence on routine that we so often see in autistic people. In a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable, sometimes we cling to the parts of our lives that we can anticipate and control. Routines can be important to autistic people because they may be the only time we truly feel in command of the outcome. Completing a familiar routine is comforting in the same way that snuggling up with a warm blanket, drinking tea, and sitting by the fire is comforting. In contrast, an alteration to that routine can feel like the equivalent of discovering cat pee on the blanket, damp wood only smoking, refusing to burn, and choking on the tea that you accidentally inhaled rather than swallowed. You had anticipated warm feelings and cozy vibes, only to be cold, disgusted, and seemingly gasping for air. Gasping for air in the least life-threatening way, but that doesn't make it feel any better as it's happening. Routines are comfortable, however, high levels of rigidity are not, nor are they sustainable. The rigidity that can come for the need for routine can certainly cause problems. However, it is possible to build routines that inherently incorporate a certain amount of flexibility. When you can, I recommend developing consistent routines, but make sure that your routine includes categories of activities rather than the specific options. By focusing on categories, you can intentionally include a rotation of activities that build in flexibility while maintaining the comfort of a routine. When I do this in a clinical setting with my clients, for example, we might do playtime, a couple of work activities, followed by a locomotor game, and ending with a break. We choose an option from the category of activity, but we're not stuck in a routine that requires a specific activity over and over. I define a meltdown as an emotional or behavioral response to an overwhelming situation or event. A meltdown and its triggers will look different for each person. Generally, when a meltdown occurs, it indicates that the demands or expectations of the situation exceed the person's current level of ability.
Feeling intense emotions can make even the most basic communication more difficult. When I'm extremely upset, I feel like a sinking boat taking on water. All of my resources or coping skills are on top of the water. They're my oxygen. As my boat begins to sink, it compromises my ability to access the oxygen, making me act frantically to maintain control. If the boat takes on too much water, I am too upset. I can no longer reach my coping skills. I cannot reach the oxygen. I have to wait until I'm able to calm down or swim back up to the top before I can communicate properly or problem solve in a constructive manner. As my boat goes down, one thing I've learned to do is reach for a paper or a keyboard. I found this to be a constructive way of expressing my feelings. Whether those feelings are just for my eyes to read or if they're shared with others, writing is a better way for me to communicate. People in my life can attest to the fact that this is a strategy I use sometimes to resolve conflict when my emotions run too high. Interestingly, the flip side is also true for me. All of my most thoughtful expressions of admiration, appreciation, and sympathy come in a written format. Even for autistic people who have fluent language abilities, providing alternative forms of communication can be really helpful in certain circumstances.
As human beings, we each have different amounts of tolerance for certain issues. For example, some of us can perform really well under pressure. Having an important deadline or being observed by a group can motivate us to concentrate or work harder. Personally, my tolerance for working under pressure is pretty high. Most of the time, I'm able to push through things when I'm feeling tired, hungry, or sad. And when a challenge arises, I have a fairly robust skill repertoire I can use for problem solving. I know how to ask others for help. I can take a break when I need one. I can switch tasks if I get tired of the one I'm working on, and I can wait until someone's available to help me. Last October, I went to Chicago to speak to a school about autism. I added a few days to that trip for sightseeing. Remember that robust skill set I mentioned having? I used every ounce of it to rent a car, navigate the city, plan meals and activities, deal with traffic, handle getting away from unexpected situations, and manage my time effectively.
Look at me, being an adult, driving in a parking garage, renting a car, not running over pedestrians. It's the most adult thing I think I've ever done.
That trip was fun, but arguably one of the more difficult adult experiences that I've had to date. In terms of tolerating stressors, I was really doing the most. We got lost a few times on the way back to the airport, didn't have enough time for lunch. We were unable to get a souvenir, and that used up the remainder of my tolerance. When I boarded the plane and realized I didn't get a window seat, despite intentionally booking one, my tolerance level was at a 0. While that robust skill repertoire for problem solving includes asking others for help when a situation arises, I do need at least a little bit of tolerance left in order to access that repertoire. As a result of having used up the last of my tolerance in the previous 48 hours on all of the nonsense that goes with travel, profanities came flying out of my mouth and my fist went flying into my face. Thanks to my travel companion, the window seat problem was easily solved by asking to switch seats with a kind stranger. This is certainly a problem I knew how to solve in isolation, but combined with my stress tolerance being at a new all-time low, I skipped over that part completely and instead went straight into a meltdown. I've observed similar challenges in some of the clients I work with. This year, my therapeutic schedule includes a 10-year-old girl who has developmentally appropriate language abilities, but extreme social and executive functioning skill deficits. After a particularly long and challenging day of dealing with the drama that are 4th grade girls, my client had also reached a place of no more tolerance. When a classmate insisted on playing with the most fun toy in the whole school by herself, my little friend could not contain her outrage. Instead of asking an adult for help, attempting to negotiate with the classmate, or choosing something else to do, my client opted for trying to rip the toy away from the other girl while screaming at her all the reasons why she was the meanest kid in the universe. Surprised at the situation, I de-escalated the conflict and invited my client to take a walk with me. As I asked about what got her to that point when she knew other ways to solve the problem, she explained how tough her day had been before I got there. Like me, my little friend felt badly for how she'd reacted in the moment when she had other tools she could have used instead. Having a lower than usual stress tolerance doesn't excuse inappropriate behavior, but it does explain it. This explanation is not meant to serve as a way to avoid consequences or responsibility. Rather, this explanation allows us to move forward, make amends, and better plan for the future. Autistic people often have skill deficits in advocating for their needs, tolerating stress, and sorting through sensory input. Adding a poor night's sleep, hunger, or irritability can be the perfect storm to create a severe emotional or behavioral response. In my case, because I am so language abled, I can usually advocate for myself. However, add in a long day at work, coupled with a few changes in my nightly routine, and suddenly a conflict with my roommate can easily turn into a situationally disproportionate emotional explosion. Without the added stressors, I could normally hear out the conflict scenario and help with problem solving. Unfortunately for me, the daily stressors of life can suck me in. At that point, my autism inhibits my ability to recognize internal cues that should tell me to take a step back and make an adjustment so that a meltdown won't occur. With all that in mind, let's talk about what to do about it. We need to be aware of triggers and contributing factors so that we can make adjustments before a meltdown happens. Before is important because once you've reached a meltdown state, you've lost your teaching opportunity. People cannot learn new information when they're in an emotional or behavioral crisis.
Time to go home.
What? No, I'm not going home.
I don't think I want to play this game anymore. I'm gonna go
You
do
have to
something
play
else.
with me. You have to play with me. Are you?
I'm gonna go.
You have to play with me. I hate it for you, but if you're here, whatever it looks like for the people in your life, you've lost your teaching opportunity. When someone's in an emotional or behavioral crisis, they cannot rationalize anything you're saying. I think of it like baseball. When they pitch the ball and it's hit out of play, that's a foul ball. Players don't ever try and coax the ball a little closer to where it should have gone. Instead, they throw it back and do the whole thing over again. Supporting autistic people should be the same way. Teaching can only move forward when a person's emotions are in play. Just like the batter needs to wait for the foul ball to be thrown back, those providing support need to wait until the tense moments have passed before attempting to teach emotional regulation or problem-solving strategies. That said, I'm not suggesting that folks in a support role just stand around and wait. Go get the ball and throw it back. The baseball game represents effective teaching. The ball's position represents a person's emotional state. The game only moves forward when the ball is in play.
We can't attempt to teach someone emotional regulation or problem-solving skills when they're upset. They won't hear you, and they're extremely unlikely to retain the information. So if we can't teach skills during a meltdown, let's talk about what we can do. When someone is extremely upset, the number one objective must be to help them return to their baseline of calm. Acknowledging someone's big feelings can help them feel heard. Generally, when people feel heard and understood, they're less likely to engage in behaviors seeking negative attention. I'll be the first to admit that my own emotional and behavioral responses during a meltdown can be over the top, considering the situation. But it's possible to validate and understand someone's feelings without justifying their response. You can offer compassion and understanding in the form of empathy statements. During a meltdown, people can feel as though they have no control over the situation. To restore that sense of control, it's helpful to offer them 2 to 3 reasonable options. Ideally, these options should be ones that promote calm behavior. Some examples include reading a book, taking a walk, listening to music, doing a puzzle. Those choices can also include offering the person help with calming down, such as a hug, turning down the lights, or working on problem solving. So the general strategy is tell the person what things you're able to do to help them and allow them to choose an option. This can sound like, I can tell you're upset about the change in schedule. I can help you by telling you what's happening next, getting you started on your next task, or by giving you some time to yourself. Notice that these are all declarative statements. Again, you might need patience. They may not make an immediate choice. In that case, wait, ride out the storm a little longer, and then reissue your offer. Too often I hear, my child will only play in one way, and they're not interested in anything else. That reminds me of Temple Grandin, who has been my role model since high school. She largely credits her success in life to the many activities she was exposed to as a child. When I heard her speak this year in Charleston, she said, I didn't want to be out doing things. I wanted to be a recluse alone in my room. My mother wouldn't let me do that. She insisted that I go out and do things with people. My own experience is not unlike hers. I didn't necessarily want to hide in my room all day as a kid, but I didn't always love trying new things. My mother also played a huge role in intentionally exposing me to a variety of leisure activities. In the context of raising children who, by their very nature, have restricted behavior and interests, encouraging exposure to novel things is crucial. I played soccer, did gymnastics, horseback riding lessons, dog training class, played basketball, attended church youth groups, volunteered at animal shelters, completed an internship at a service dog training organization, and attended homeschool co-op. Did I love all those things? Not all the time. But the main point of participating in those activities wasn't to find my new favorite thing, explore future career opportunities, or even develop diverse skill sets. Sure, that might have been a secondary objective at times, but the primary value was making connections. I recognize that parents may struggle to provide a wide variety of activities. Time, money, and childcare can be hard to come by and hard to justify when you know that the child might not even enjoy the activity at all. Please understand that I fully acknowledge those barriers, along with the more difficult barriers that accompany the characteristics of profound autism. Sticking around for the duration of an affair can be perceived as anywhere from mildly intimidating to fully paralyzing. It can be helpful to break the task into smaller pieces, only asking the child to complete a portion of the activity. For example, I have a client who's enjoyed doing the same 2 puzzles over and over each day. When presented with new puzzles, this client would push them away or say, "No, thank you," on repeat. Instead of insisting that he do a whole new puzzle from start to finish, I put together most of the pieces myself while he watched nearby. I left the last 7 for him to finish. He was resistant at first, but eventually gave it a try. Now he likes at least 6 different puzzles, instead of only 2. I'm not asking him to go through 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles every week. I'm simply exposing him to the different types of puzzles to help him challenge that rigidity that holds him back from new experiences. As you probably know, people on the autism spectrum have various sensory needs. Sometimes their bodies require more input, making them sensory seekers. Other times, their bodies require less input, making them sensory avoiders. Like everything else, this is highly individualized and subject to change based on the conditions the person is experiencing at any given time. Here's an example of a therapist helping a teen get his sensory seeking needs met.
Practicing self-advocacy with autistic teens.
It looks like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. What did you want? Okay, here it comes. Hello. I can totally give you a hug, but I think what you wanted more was. You want pressure? Some pressure on your head. Pressure on your head.
For me, I'm usually a sensory avoider. I often use headphones and earplugs to reduce sound. I wear sunglasses to reduce light, and I avoid overhead lights whenever possible. However, there are times, especially when I haven't exercised recently, when I start to seek out stimulation. This looks different depending on the context, but sometimes I find myself seeking sensory input in order to help me complete my daily tasks.
Because of your autism, too late, and you can't pack your snacks for going to Miss Lisa's house, you know what really helps?
What helps?
The Spanish alphabet. The alphabet is easy to learn. Speak and rhythm, each letter gets a turn. Speak and rhythm, it be working. We be packing the lunch. Pack that lunch. Pack that lunch. Pack that. That's why I built the wall today. I was thinking that too. I was just want to help people.
There we go.
Yep.
Snacks are packed.
See, autism, not too spicy.
It's helpful to understand that someone engaging in loud or hyperactive behavior like mine might be seeking out sensory stimulation. It's important to ensure that the sensory need is met, ideally with activities that don't get on everyone else's nerves. To do that, we have to identify the sensation they're seeking. Then we can attempt to replicate it in a way that is safe, sanitary, and socially acceptable. For example, playing with certain food substances or shaving cream can be a good alternative to fecal smearing, and we all want that, right? In my experience as a therapist, many kids who are sensory avoiders are far more likely to ask others to stop talking than they are to go to a different room. I think it's important to teach them strategies to modify their own behavior to reduce sensory input. What they find offensive is often pretty normal to the people around them. While advocating for their sensory needs is an important skill, it's equally important to be able to generate solutions to problems that are within their control. We don't get to decide what others do, but we can control what we do. If someone's being too loud, you might ask them to quiet down, but you can also put on headphones or go to another room. Whichever way a person swings in terms of sensory preference, it's important that they know a variety of healthy ways to get what they need. You might work with them to create a visual menu of options to safely seek out or avoid a particular sensation. Seeing which options are available can help kids make a choice and then communicate that choice to someone who can assist them. When your online content reaches 2 million accounts every 30 days, it means that many people will reciprocate that reach. For me specifically, it means I get lots of questions from parents, many of whom have limited resources and don't know where else to turn for answers as to the best way to support their autistic child. Some parents have written to me that they consider it a red flag when organizations do not allow parent participation. Those parents would be right. In fact, I think it's a red flag when organizations don't encourage or require some level of parental involvement. As a service provider myself, I think I speak for all of us when I say one of the more disappointing things in this job is seeing families with the attitude of, fix my kid and call me back when he's better. That sort of approach from families does not lend itself to positive or sustainable outcomes for kids. That said, I believe that you are all demonstrating your commitment to your child's success by spending your time attending this event. To give your kids the best chance of achieving a meaningful outcome, you need to collaborate with teachers and therapists. Are you the we all sit together at the dinner table sort of family? Tell your child's team that. We can work together to make that not only manageable, but ideally enjoyable. Are you the sit around the TV and eat whatever you like type of family? Tell your child's team. Therapeutic and educational assessments can only account for so much. To truly individualize treatment the way it should be, families need to provide information to help us know the specific opportunities and experiences that are pertinent to their particular family unit. Another scenario I frequently hear from parents and one that I observed firsthand, is the one where the previously mentioned child is now a teenager, and that teenager is rapidly approaching adulthood. The family, along with a team of service providers, suddenly realize how many self-care skills are missing. When autistic kids enter adolescence, we often see a shift in priorities towards emphasizing self-help or life skills. This is logical because independence becomes increasingly important as we approach adulthood. But as every survivor of adolescence remembers, as teens, we're often resistant to other people's ideas of what we should do or how we should do it. That's just the nature of growing up, which is something I can say with certainty now that I'm officially out of the young adult stage of life since I turned 27 this month. As a certified grown-up in the adult stage of life, I'm now entitled to use the phrase, back when I was a kid. So, back when I was a kid, my autism did nothing but amplify my resistance to ideas from adults. This tends to hold true in my clinical experience working with teens on the spectrum. Sometimes families and service providers, through no ill intent, will do for the child more than is necessary. Self-help skills can take a back seat when parents are focused on getting the child out the door for school or therapy. But if those kids are teens before they're asked to independently brush their hair, wash their clothes, apply deodorant, or clip their fingernails, they will frequently assert their adolescent tendency toward resistance. Interfering challenging behaviors, sensory needs, and motor skills can all complicate the process of learning to care for oneself. However, as someone who had a designated lotion spoon, I can tell you that it is possible to find ways to adapt nearly every task. And if you don't know what a lotion spoon is, it's the kind of spoon you use to rub your lotion onto your legs so that your hands don't have to feel slimy. Caring for ourselves isn't a task that's unique to adulthood. We have body parts and needs for the duration of our time on the planet Earth. The best time to start working on self-care is all the time. I encourage you to include your younger kids in self-care routines and require a certain amount of participation. We did it. Thanks for sticking with me. Hopefully I've given you some actionable information on each of these topics.
Awesome.
If you want to get more from me, you can scan the code to follow me on social media. Thank you for your time and attention.
Sorry, Kaeylynn, didn't mean to interrupt the end, but
No, you're good. I think we have time for questions maybe?
yes, We do. I first just want to say, Kaylynn, that was just truly wonderful. And I just wanted to thank you so much for your courage of sharing such insightful, real stories, and then your wisdom to go ahead and take those stories and make them into wonderful lessons and tips for the community. So you're just truly, I can just see the ripple effect of the people that you're empowering and helping, and truly incredible. So thank you so much for that presentation. And if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I do have one in here, Kaylynn. It's a little long, so bear with me. From Casey, it says, I'm doing my RBT training now and almost done with my 40 hours. I also have a son on the spectrum, which is my biggest motivation behind my training. I would love any input or tips I could get on having a higher functioning child who is a seeker and an avoider that also changes needs. I can find it very difficult to pinpoint his needs at times. So I'm guessing she's asking about sensory tips for a seeker and avoider.
I think for both us, people who are experiencing seeking tendencies as well as avoiding tendencies, I don't talk about it a whole lot, but I feel like for me personally, exercise is really, really helpful in being able to regulate those things both ways. Even if you're feeling, more extreme avoidance or more extreme seeking needs, exercise can kind of help your body to balance out those feelings. And I don't know how scientific that is, but that's one thing that I've found to be personally helpful. So having a consistent routine where you're kind of getting exposure to a variety of sensory input and incorporating exercise into those routines can be really helpful with that.
Awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see any other questions in the queue, but if you can, here's just one popped up. Okay. So can you talk more about how to help a child calm down when they are in a meltdown mode? My son often becomes violent or tries to hurt himself. So while they're escalated, what would be your best tip or thing to do at that time?
It can definitely be challenging because individuals can be so different.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when someone is, that level of escalated where they're engaging in aggression or self-injury, working on problem solving is usually it's not the time for that. We really just need to focus on getting to a certain level of calm. So focusing on activities that kind of promote calmer behavior. Some people can regulate themselves with exercises, so taking a walk can be helpful. For other people, that might increase escalated behavior. And so we maybe don't want to have exercise when we're already kind of escalated. Taking a break in a quiet place or listening to music, finding some alternative action besides hitting. So instead of hitting, we're gonna read our book, or we're gonna color, just any alternative action, and then working on problem solving after de-escalation has kind of already happened or has happened at least a little bit, can be really helpful.
Awesome. Okay, we have a question from Sarah. She's an inclusion coach for a preschool or for preschool educators. And she wants to know, what are your top tips you could give educators for just to be more inclusive of children on the spectrum? So maybe this is just a general preschool room, and how could they help be more inclusive?
One thing that I see, I do this a lot for my clients in an inclusion setting, as well as in an autism specific setting, as it relates specifically to conversation. A lot of times my clients who are motivated to engage with others maybe get lost in some of the wordiness of interactions or conversation. So when you are working with somebody who maybe wants to be a part of a group, but maybe doesn't know how to approach them or doesn't know how to join in, making it, the activity, not necessarily altering the activity, but providing instructions so that they can participate in some respect. So for example, I had a client who the other day was wanting to engage in conversation with some other guys, and I knew that he was not going to join in. So I walked over there with him and I said, hey, they're talking about topic. What do you think about topic? And, kind of making it more accessible and giving him some space to be able to insert his own thoughts and then naturally engage with the other people in the environment.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll do one more question, and Andrea has a good one. She wants to know what you think about ABA therapy. She said that she's heard from some people that it might not be good for autism, and is interested in your direct opinion on ABA therapy.
Yeah, I am actually an ABA therapist myself. So hopefully that answers your question at least a little bit. The field is making some really, really, monumental shifts from where we kind of started. And just like everything else, as it relates to modern medicine or the education system, does it have kind of a shady history? Yeah, most things do. ABA is a fairly new thing relative to a lot of other practices. And I think we've just kind of had some growing pains, but the field really is moving in a fantastic direction. And I'm happy to say that I'm definitely a part of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kaeylynn. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now, but thank you all so much for joining us. You can check out hirasmus.com if you want to learn how we can help others. And also follow us on social media. We have a lot of free resources and other webinars for the community as well. Thank you again so much, Kaeylynn, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day. Thank you for learning and growing with us today.
Thank you.